Welcome to the Everything History Podcast for episode 46, Short Remarks on Marcellinus' 14th book.
I discharged my last duty as king and emperor.
This is Everything History.
Everything you hold worthwhile is at stake.
We meant more to kids than Jesus did, or religion at that time.
I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth.
When I first intended to write this episode, I meant to have a rather long-form discussion on Ammianus Marcellinus' 14th book and the ground that he covered. I hoped that this would be possible, or rather, I hoped that I had enough to say on the subject. But, and you knew that misnomer was coming, I really have very little to say on the subject. Nothing except his remarks on the depravity and social ridiculousness of Rome came to my mind. So at first I tried going back through the material to pick up any loose ends that I might elaborate on or connect with other things. I realized that by doing so, I would be stretching my means, or, as I would prefer to say, bullshitting. BSing is always something to avoid, but many people in and around the field of history seem to revel in fluff and rhetorical BS. I don't, so I'm going to make my remarks short because they are naturally short on the topic at hand. I said when I first began to read from the Res Gestae of Ammianus that he would be hard to grasp and understand. Much of that is due to the translation. The freely available translation that most find is from over a century ago, and to be honest, it is very sloppy. I believe it is the John Rolfe translation. And from taking Latin and Greek, I can tell you that almost every sentence of the translation is confused by its literal nature, meaning the words are absolutely grammatically correct and functional as translated, but they are obtuse, lack meaning, and the translation becomes borderline wrong because of it. So some of the hard-to-understand rhetoric comes from the literal confusion of the translation. The original Latin is much more matter-of-fact, and all the relative clauses make more sense. Nevertheless, Ammianus is still a difficult read. Which actually brings me to my next point. Marcellinus is odd to read because his structure is foreign to us in the modern day. The way we digest information, stories, and text is not perfectly compatible to the ancients. It is still compatible, but it seems unnatural to the contemporary eye. Part of that is due to Roman culture and ancient style, but a lot of the leftover style is the personal method of Marcellinus. The way Marcellinus wrote his history is a temporal narrative, meaning it is going in one direction in time, forward, as we would think of it, but he is providing so much detail and goes on so many tiny tangents that his work gets convoluted. Therefore, you might notice that his history works well in short segments, but not all at once, which is likely intentional. It was intentionally written to be anecdotal, cited, and referenced. Most ancient texts outside of speeches and epic poetry operated with a methodology such that the individual parts worked as a narrative when combined, but also worked as isolated pieces of literature. The Bible is the most famous example of this. Most laws and codexes operate in the same way. It's a very Roman method of presenting information. As for Marcellinus, he was heavily influenced by Tacitus, who the Romans seem to have considered the greatest historian. I would not disagree that he was the greatest Roman historian, and his style influenced all Roman historians after, especially Ammianus, who likely picked up where Tacitus left off. A final note, and it's on my favorite section of his 14th book, Section 6, The Faults of the Roman Senate and People. I'm not going to summarize it, but I highlight this section as the most interesting and compelling of the 14th book, because Marcellinus gives us a glimpse into more than just happenings. He gives us a brief look at late Roman culture and life. It's through his own perspective, and while it is seemingly jaded and cynical, it is still all-important and very intriguing. The final portion of Section 11 is important as well, because Marcellinus finally moves history forward with his execution of Gallus Caesar. But, more interestingly, his comments on fate, or the fates I might say, and the goddess Nemesis in particular are endlessly fascinating. For these comments on Adrastia/Nemesis, look to Book 14, Section 11, passages 25 and 26. I thought I might as well read those two passages out, because I feel his thoughts are not isolated to him or ancient Rome. His words on fate, destinies, and the work of Nemesis are concepts that remain beyond our understanding, and his explanation of such concepts is just as valid today, despite how foreign his words and constructs may seem. The ideas are not foreign to you. Only the names. Be mindful of that. With that, Book 14, Section 11, passages 25 and 26. Quote, "These and innumerable other instances of the kind are sometimes, and would that it were always so, the work of Adrastia, the chastiseer of evil deeds and the rewarder of good actions, whom we also call by the second name of Nemesis. She is, as it were, the sublime jurisdiction of an efficient divine power, dwelling, as men think, above the orbit of the moon, or as others divine her, an actual guardian presiding with universal sway over the destinies of individual men. The ancient theologians, regarding her as the daughter of justice, say that from an unknown eternity she looks down upon all the creatures of earth. She is queen of causes and arbiter and judge of events, controls the urn with its lots, and causes the changes of fortune. And sometimes she gives our plan a different result than that which we aimed, changing and confounding many actions. She too, binding the vainly swelling pride of mortals with the indissoluble bond of fate, and tilting changeably, as she knows how to do, the balance of gain and loss, now bends and weakens the uplifted necks of the proud, and now, raising the good from the lowest estate, lifts them to a happy life. Moreover, the storied past has given her wings in order that she might be thought to come to all with swift speed, and it has given her a helm to hold, and has put a wheel beneath her feet, in order that none may fail to know that she runs through all the elements and rules the universe." End quote. And with that I end this short episode, and before I continue with Ammianus Marcellinus' book 15, I will be reading from Sextus Aurelius Victor's De Caesaribus, a much shorter history. Remember that you can contact me on the podcast Facebook page or at the email address everythinghistorypodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you very much.